This week on Information Technology Leaders, Rick Devenuti, the Chief Information Officer of Microsoft Corporation. Now here's our host, Laura Schildkraut.
Today's guest is the Chief Information Officer of the Microsoft Corporation. From as early as anyone can remember, he always knew what he wanted and found a way to get it. This later translated into his professional philosophy that failure is not an option. Yet he's also full of surprises. In high school, he was 5'11" tall and weighed 120 pounds soaking wet, yet he insisted upon playing football. To amuse his staff, this serious man showed up for a meeting in a French maid outfit. I don't know about you guys, but I'd like to have seen that. But the thing that surprised me most was that after he'd been a successful Microsoft executive for years, he still took significant steps to further improve his management and leadership skills. With each interaction we have, I know I become more and more impressed. Please welcome Rick Devenuti.
I heard about that.
You heard about that, yes. I usually start by asking guests where they grew up, but that's not necessarily a simple question for you, is it?
No, it's not. We moved around a lot as a child.
Where did you move from and to?
Primarily from the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, and grew up there till about second grade. Went down to Florida for the Cape. My dad got a job with Boeing during the big missile pushes. Mm-hmm. And we came up to Seattle in '69, just in time for the first landing on the moon.
Wow.
Unfortunately, there was about 30,000 other people that came up at the time, and that's when the big Boeing crash happened. Mm-hmm. So we went back on the road and spent some time in California, Phoenix, back to Jersey. I was actually born in Texas, so I've covered the perimeter of the country pretty well.
When did you become a Mets fan?
Well, I kind of grew up a Mets fan,
Yeah.
the early stages, and came out here in, as I said, '69, so for the amazing Mets.
Right.
And then went back there for 70, 71, 72, 73.
How did all that moving around affect the person that you are today?
Oh, you know, I don't think too much about that. How would it affect you? I think it tends to make me a little more cautious about people. Maybe a little bit more cautious going into new situations. Maybe I've gotten into a lot of new situations. I think maybe I'm a little quieter than some people, and particularly in new environments, try to get the lay. But I think, by and large, it's helped. I get the lay of the land quickly. Mm-hmm. You know, I've done that since an early age.
Mm-hmm. Which probably helped us with all the moving around to different jobs.
Yeah, I think so.
I
think the ability to go into a new situation and become comfortable quickly probably, you know, I mean, when you're 6 years old and leaving your best friend, it's a little traumatic. But,
yeah. And that was before email.
It worked,
right.
That's right.
Tell us about the Triumph Spitfire.
Triumph Spitfire. What can I tell you about Triumph Spitfire? Most of the stories about Spitfire I'd probably keep to myself. It was the first car I ever bought, first car I ever owned. I got all the... I've not had a sports car since, so maybe I got all the need for a sports car thing out early. I think I was 19 years old, 20 years old when I bought it, and you know, was part of my grown-up stage. I needed something with good lines at an early age.
What were you like in high school?
Pretty average. I was a jock, a little bit of a jock. Not a great student, but good enough to get by. I probably didn't take school as a single priority. You know, I had school, I had sports, I had friends. Generally had a job, a night job sometime through my junior, senior year. So school was one part of my being, I guess.
You said that you didn't get very good grades necessarily. When did you first know you were smart?
I don't know that I am smart.
I don't know. All the people we talk to think you're pretty smart.
Thanks.
So you don't ever feel smart?
No, I actually got into the business school at the University of Washington on appeal. I didn't have the grade point to get in.
Really?
So I don't think they thought I was very smart.
How did that appeals process work?
I have no idea. When I left high school, I was on my way to Washington State University and got a random call from the soccer coach at BCC. And Ron was an ex-Sounder, and he talked a buddy of mine into going there to play ball. So I kind of fortunately dropped the Cougar thing and went over to BCC, played ball for a year, started working. The next thing you know, I'm 21 years old, living in Bellingham. Had about I don't know, 2 quarters worth of community college, and decided that working for, I was doing retail up there, that I wanted to go back to school. So, long story, got back here, got into school here at about 22, and my 3.2 or whatever it was wasn't very impressive. But I was working 40 hours a week, and so I wrote a little letter, and I have no idea how it happened.
But in you came.
I was on my way to Seattle U when they called me, so it worked out well.
Is there anything that you wish you'd taken more advantage of during your college days?
Oh, geez. You know, I guess I wish I would have taken more advantage of college. Again, you know, my experience, the 18 to 21-year-old experience, wasn't a college experience. It was, I worked full-time during most of that period. I was focused on other parts of life that I enjoyed very much. But
he says with a smirk.
Yeah. I lived life very full in those years, but it was different than you know, the college situation. So when I got to the University of Washington at 21, 22, there was a little bit of jealousy of you know, the fraternity system and the dorms and the experience that you know, my peers at that time were having, and yet there was also a whole other set of experiences that I brought with me.
So you were jealous of them, or they were jealous of you?
I think I was jealous of them, right? It seemed like a very fun period of time, particularly, and again, I was 22, they were 19 or 20, and it seemed like they were having a lot of fun. On the other hand, for me, I probably wasn't ready to make the effort that's required in a school such as this at 18. As I said, you know, there was other parts of me and other aspects of life that I enjoyed quite a bit.
Did you start to get more serious about school when you got here?
Oh, absolutely. When I decided to go back to school, it was clear, you know, I had a destination I was going to, and school was part of getting that. So, as I said, I'm not sure I would have got the 3.2 at, you know, at
right,
18.
had you known.
So, and obviously my grades got better as time went on.
As you completed college, you had a lot of job offers. Can you tell us about the recruitment process that you went through, that sort of long recruiting process, and then why you made the decision that you did?
Well, it's funny, you just mentioned to me as we sat down this recruiting season, I'd kind of forgotten about it, but I went through the traditional University of Washington accounting school process. I joined Beta Alpha, I think it was Beta Alpha Psi, it's accounting fraternity, probably 3 weeks before the cutoff for the full quarter, and you know, went to the dinners, got a little feel for what the public profession was like. I had probably decided when I was 10 or 11 I wanted to be a CPA. I don't know what would have driven me at that time, but that's what
It's an interesting choice.
or an airline pilot.
Not a football player?
No, I don't think sports paid that much back then. I'm not sure how that worked out. At any rate, I couldn't get into any of the academies, so I decided the pilot thing was out, and you know, the cost of private licenses was hard. So it was accounting, and I spent that fraternity period learning a little bit about the accounting firms, that there were 8 of them at the time. Kind of shows my age a little bit.
Mine too.
And so there's this, you know, once a week dinner or something like that, and then I went over to the, I think it's the placement center, signed up for the interviews, and was lucky. I mean, I focused on the Big 8, got lucky, got 5 job offers out of that, and went to Deloitte Haskins, then Deloitte Haskins and Sells.
And why did you make the decision to go with them rather than one of the other offers?
I mean, all the firms are certainly impressive, and all the firms have slightly different personalities. I think there was, for me, it came down to two firms, Ernst and Deloitte. And you know, I really made the decision, or 2 things. I really liked the people I met at Deloitte. I also had a very good friend at Ernst who had a similar career path to mine, but had gotten through it about a year earlier. We knew each other since high school, and you know, Kevin was putting pressure on me to be there. And Kevin had been very successful in his first year there, and you know, it came down to my concern that I wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting too much help from Kevin. That, you know, if it was going to make or break it, that I wanted to go in with a clean slate. And while both firms were great, I just decided that being a little bit more independent, if you will, might make more sense for me.
You also told me about the guy from Montana, and that had something to do with the decision.
Yeah, I met, you know, during the recruiting process, you probably meet 10 or 11 people. You interview on campus, and you go and you you spend a day, and then generally, as they go into full recruitment, you get a couple callbacks, right, as you're trying to decide between the firms. I met a guy, his name was Dave, I don't remember his last name, a Montanan, a very easygoing, great personality. He was 4th or 5th year, wasn't quite a manager, so I was senior accountant at the time. And I thought, this was a very fun person. Although I decided to be an accountant, I'd never been one. My jobs all through school were in retail, and so I didn't really know much about accountants. There's certainly a stereotype. You know, I knew the people I was in school with. I knew who I was. I don't know if I necessarily fit that stereotype. And Dave didn't fit that stereotype. So, you know, he was certainly one of the contributors. As it turns out, you know, you take your job in December, you show up in September, and particularly in the public firms, a third of the people you met aren't there anymore. Needless to say, Dave wasn't there when I got
Dave's
back.
gone.
And so a good lesson for me, right? Make the decision based on what you see in the company, not a specific individual, because he or she may not be there when you get there. But
you
I
sort of
think
learned that through
that lesson,
a lot of
you
things,
know,
Kind of
that
came up
was the
again
first
and again.
lesson. But I think the spirit that Deloitte had and the personality, this office, every office different, was a good fit for me.
And what was the first couple of things that you did when you were there?
I learned how to use a 10 key, as hard as that is to imagine now. I took a tutorial on DOS, because when I left University of Washington, I was still using cards.
These guys don't know what punch cards
No,
are.
it's,
I was in a class once and somebody guessed that the punch card was one that you get from Starbucks. You buy 10 coffees, get one free, and that's what these folks seem to think punch cards are. And then we talk about carbon paper and just get it over with.
Yeah, well, it shows which generation you're
Yes.
from. So I went from punch cards to a DOS lesson. My early days at Deloitte were mostly in financial services. Safeco Mutual Funds back here in the U District, Rainier Bank at the time. I don't even know who they'd be now, but they're a big
Switched so many
regional
times,
bank. So I did a lot of financial services the first couple of years.
And then after 2 years, you made a switch. And what did you switch to?
It was actually an interesting story because of the luck. You know, I was lucky to get into University of Washington. That got me a job at Deloitte. I was the in-charge accountant over at Safeco Mutual Funds, and the manager on the job quit. So a guy by the name of Scott Boggs, who's now the controller at Microsoft, oddly enough. Scott picked up this engagement, and he didn't know anything about mutual funds. And so he was the boss, and he'd come in once a week, and I explained what was going on. And so Scott relied quite a bit on me to do that. At the end of every job in the public firms, your manager does a review of you. It's different than having an employee, but you kind of get, hopefully, a little mentoring, a little direction. And we were sitting over here in a bar in the Ave, and Scott said, "Yeah, you did a really good job. Appreciate, bringing me up to speed, and here's what you need to work on." We went through that. He said, "I think you'd have a good, second-year person. I think you have a good future." And I said, "Well, I think I'm going to quit." I said, "Why are you going to do that?" And I said, "Well, this financial services stuff is not very fun." Now, Scott was manager over in the Bellevue office, which was our small business division. And, so he took that in and called me about 3 weeks later. This was the March set of funds for Safeco. They close in March and September. So he called me and said, "I see you're going on vacation last week of June." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I got this small business client we just picked up in the high-tech area, and if you'd be willing to change your vacation, I can get you on that engagement and see how you like the high-tech thing." So he said, it's a really rapidly growing company. You might have heard of them. It's Microsoft. So at the time, they were a small business client, and I changed my trip to New York. I was actually going to New York with Kevin. We changed our vacations, and I moved over to the Bellevue office. So.
And then how long before you started working for Microsoft as an employee?
About 2 years later. I spent about 2 years on the engagement. We took them public, did all their filings after that, and I spent about a year post-public with them, and eventually found the right position over there. So, in many ways in the public sector, a traditional career path. You go from college to public accounting to a job with one of your clients. And, Scott and I still talk about the value that beer made in my life.
That's right. Yeah, it's funny how those connections
Yeah,
happen.
I should have bought him the beer now that I think about it.
I'm sure you've paid each other back many times over since then. Did you end up having to go through the traditional Microsoft interview process, or were you considered an insider?
No, it was kind of funny when I the first day I started, the recruiter said, "We don't have a resume for you." So I'd worked there for 2 years on campus. In fact, the last year I was virtually there all the time. I had very few other client interactions. Steve Gregg was the controller. Over the course of last year, I knew I wanted to be there. He wanted me. It was just a matter of finding the right job, and so we negotiated a deal. And I did the paperwork after I, changed my badge, I guess.
And then you were a blue badge.
Yeah, it was blue badge.
The famous blue badge. Yeah. And was it different being an employee at Microsoft than being a consultant for Microsoft?
Probably not. The company was much smaller when I first got there. I was there a lot, particularly in the finance department. I knew everybody. I don't know that I felt more employee before or after. So I think it was a very easy transition.
Did anything surprise you?
Surprised me. The use of email surprised me, even though I was on campus a lot. The use of email surprised me. Probably we talk about it a lot, the aggressiveness or tone outside the group that I had interacted with. As an outsider, I spent a lot of time with the finance people, and you're doing audits, you're doing consulting, whatever you're doing, a very small group. When I became an employee and interacted with the rest of the company, the discussion topics were different. And with those discussions came a different level of volume and aggressiveness that probably was a surprise to me.
And what instincts of yours started kicking in at that point?
Competition, survival, the base fight or flight things kick in.
So did you find that you got more aggressive to sort of match it?
Yeah, I think you adapt to your environment. I don't think of myself as an overly aggressive person. Not sure that's what everybody at work would say. But you certainly need to be confident. You need to stand up for what you believe in, and you better be able to defend what you believe in. That might seem aggressive. I think I'm Italian by background. I'm used to a lot of energy and debate and high volumes around the dinner table. So it doesn't bother me when people yell. My family's always been yellers. So that might have helped a little bit. But yeah, I think you raise to the aggressiveness or volume of the situation you're in.
How did you learn how to survive the whole email thing?
Prioritization. I think, again, I wouldn't want to start there today not knowing some of the tricks I know now. I didn't get 100 emails a day when I started. 100's a slow day now.
Right.
When you get there, you get on all the aliases, right? You want to hear the jokes, you want to know the racket. Right now, you get off all that stuff, right? It just changes. So I think you learn the tricks, you learn what's important, you learn who's important, you learn if you haven't answered in 2 days, delete it. They would have come back to you with important, right?
Yeah.
So I think, I was lucky enough, and I think the same thing about the company, I was lucky enough to be there at a time where it was easier to understand, easier to grasp. The environment was, we were in 4 buildings. So
that's right, I forgot that you started back when it was only 4.
It was easier to grow up with the company than it probably would be today to come in and get 100 emails.
Right, just smacking you in the face. I think the third thing that you learned was how to manage people rather than managing projects. You said that was different from the management situation you'd faced over at Deloitte.
Yeah, I mentioned that a little bit in the review process at Deloitte, right? As a manager of an engagement or a project, you have to live with the people you get. Now, if you're smart, you make friends with a scheduler. You always try to get the good people, and the good people gravitate towards you. But you don't have to live with them very long. Reviews 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, so you get rid of them. Right? So it's not like you have to live with them. You have to deal with a little personality or performance issue. But employees are different. Right? They're there all the time, and your responsibility as a mentor, a coach, a developer is more important from a company perspective. And I think this isn't a slam against Deloitte. I think all the public firms know there's a limited number of people who are going to go to the top, to the partner stage, and the investment they make in people grows over time. Once you hire somebody in the private sector, if you will, those people are there they're part of the fabric of the company, and you don't get to discard them after 8 weeks. So it does change your view of management, your need to deal with different personalities and learn how to work around them.
And was that something that came easily to you or not?
No, I don't think management is something I had thought much about or had developed great skills in. I think I was a pretty good contributor, individual contributor, and I had managed, 6, 8 people in a different engagement. But again, I wasn't focused. They were all very similar type of person. And I think as I've thought about the firms and your question about who did I go to work for, each firm kind of gravitates to a certain person. Well, you surround yourself by 6 people just like you don't have that many issues, right? You put yourself in a different population, much more diverse population, there's more issues that come up. So I probably wasn't as prepared for that. I probably made all the typical management mistakes. I now give a lecture when we hire consultants or people from public sector. I give that same lecture about what I had to learn coming in. But I think it's something that you have to work at and grow.
And then after a bit, you moved over to the controller spot of the U.S. Sales and Marketing Division. How did that come about?
Well, I'd started as a manager in the accounting group, working for the controller. I was probably there 4 or 5 months when they decided he was not the right fit for that job. And so the job opened. They put me in an acting role for 6 months or so, and finally decided it was time. We kind of both decided it was time to do something about that acting role, and they decided I was the right person.
And then in March of '89, word shipped late. Tell us about the impact that had on the division and then the impact it had on you.
I think it was, I look at that as a great thing for me. The scenario was, we're a very rapidly growing company, and our revenues are generated by product release, right? We have a very, very predictable cycle, shipment of a lot of product, fill a channel, early adopters, and then it tails off to hopefully a new stair step. And we missed shipping Word. I think it was Word 3. And our customers were ready for it. The channel was ready for it. We found a late problem with the product and didn't ship. And the division lost money for that quarter, which was, it's the way the company had been growing. Nobody had thought about losing money in a quarter. Scott Oakey had come over from International to run the division, and it surprised him. Needless to say, the forecasting piece wasn't as clean then as it is today. The information flow wasn't as good from the channel as it is today. And so he decided he needed to have a better understanding of finance. And it was really a great opportunity for me to get out of the pure finance controller's role and into the business partnership role with a senior executive.
And that kind of got you to be able to sit in on your first meeting with Bill Gates. And what was it like to sit in on those meetings? What did you learn from that? Again,
the culture of the company, you get a different view from the top, right? And so the ability to be there as a functional expert, or to be prepared to answer a couple questions as opposed to be presenting, was kind of a formative thing. The ability to be in the room, understand the players, see the level of volume or directness in communication at that level was a great opportunity. And to see people who had been talked to in a very direct manner still have a job the next day was probably a good learning experience. I think if my first interaction had been at that level, personally directed in some cases, it would have been hard to understand. That's just the culture.
Right. It's not personal.
It's not personal. It's business, right? And it's fact-based, it's intellect-based, it's not personal-based. And sometimes you can confuse the two just through the tone.
So do you think your first meeting with him directly ended up going better?
Well, I'd met with Bill before on specific point topics, but it was more of a informational. It wasn't we have a problem, or I want to sell you something. I want to get something approved. No question, when I had to do my first presenting in that form, I was much more comfortable with what the rules are. Right? There's no written rules. Right. There's rules that develop in companies and cultures, and I had an insider's view of those rules. I think that was very helpful.
You then became the Director of Financial Analysis. How did that come about?
We were at the point in the company's growth that we needed to move from accounting to analysis. And we'd grown very rapidly. We'd done a great job on the accounting side. We understood the numbers and could close the books and all of those things. But we weren't doing as good a job looking forward in the future. mergers and acquisitions were starting to happen and how good a job we're doing on that. And mostly just understanding the business principles, because we're no longer just a application and operating system business, right? The retail channel was growing and changing. And so we decided we needed to spin off the analysis function. And it's a classic problem. When you're closing the books, you can't do analysis, and the business doesn't necessarily want to hear you're closing the books for the next 10 days, looking backwards when they need to look forward. So we spun off a group to really focus on the business analysis and financial analysis of the company, and it was a great opportunity for me to move from the pure accounting stays and again, further into the business side.
And you hired several MBAs at that time. Was it hard to hire MBAs when you didn't have one?
I think it was an ego thing. What I did have, it was interesting, when we started to do that, we decided in order to build a financial analysis group, we didn't want more accountants. We wanted financial people, and we decided, following a theme that worked very well for the company, to go recruit on campus. And you know, this is probably 92, 91, 92. You know, the classic model then was you come out of school, you go to Wall Street for a couple years, get your MBA, and you're ready to conquer the world. So we did notice a fair amount of cockiness in these individuals, and they were all bright, energetic people. And so, you know, I remember the first interview thinking, wow, this guy's really good, and maybe a little intimidating for me. But I realized that their knowledge was very superficial at the time. They'd studied and they'd been in great schools. We only went to a limited number of schools. But I had a depth of knowledge that was pretty good. I remember telling someone, we just need to, I just realized this is being filmed. So my quote might need to change a little bit. But I remember saying we needed to lower them a step in their expectations early in their career at Microsoft in order to let them grow with a more balanced view of their own skill set.
And Microsoft would be very well suited for that task.
Yes.
I would think.
And so we did that, and it worked out very well. Many of them are still there in senior positions. So that original recruiting class for the financial analysis role turned out to be a really good group of people.
This seemed to be about the time that your philosophy that failure is not an option really started taking hold. How did that affect your management style?
I think it's one of the weaknesses I have in my management style, and I don't know if it started to take hold there or it's just a basic part of my personality. I've never accepted failure well. I don't expect to fail. And when faced with failure, I tend to react in a fairly direct and sometimes controlling way. And that can be demotivating as a manager. It's one of the things you need to work on. But I don't allow, failure only happens when you're unprepared or underanalyzed, in my view. Sometimes you can work hard enough to get out of failure, but most of the time you have to plan out of it and execute out of it. And when people allow us to get so far down the stream that we can't pull out, I have very little patience. And so, those early warning systems and candor about where we are, I get very frustrated if I don't see that, and I tend to grab ownership.
You then became the general manager of sales operations. What was that job about?
That was a role. I got a call from the vice president of sales one day to do something different, which was to get out of finance entirely and manage a very diverse group of tasks that were necessary to support the sales force. So one was about a 400-person call center, a training group, sales training, compensation for a commissioned sales force, and a negotiation and contract team for what was the early stages of what now we'd call volume licensing. We were having companies want to buy licenses versus boxes, and we were in the early stages of thinking, what do we give away, what don't we give away, how do we price a non-COGS item? And this is back in the days when pricing was very easy. Databases were $6.95, word processors were $4.95, and upgrades were $129, and everybody's prices were the same. And you throw in this idea of no COGS, and we needed some analysis and support on the contract side. So, I got to learn about call centers, I got to learn about contracts and pricing, I got to do sales training, which I probably wasn't the most equipped person for, and learned a little bit about sales force compensation plans, which is something you don't ever want to spend time on.
And what did you learn from Mike Appy at the time?
Mike was one of my great mentors. I learned a lot about detail, I learned about, I think Mike was a person who didn't take failure well. I learned a whole new level of aggressiveness that Mike possessed. Mostly I learned the value of preparation and execution. Mike had a great ability to plan events. What are we going to do? What is step? And I learned a lot about sales from him as well.
You also told me something about raising the bar, that constant raising of the bar.
Yeah, Mike was a perfectionist, and he was very, very smart. And so to compete with Mike or to meet Mike's expectations required me to kick it up a notch. Mm-hmm. I was in a new role. I wasn't a functional expert in any of those things that he had talked me into taking, and yet he expected excellence in there. And in those situations, I would say Mike was an easy man to work for if you hit his expectations, and a hard one to work for if you didn't. Mm-hmm. And so in those situations, you have to make a decision on how much pain you want to absorb. I would say I raised my bar to try to reach his. I think it was a great personal development opportunity.
I think that's very similar to the way that people would describe you as well.
Yeah, I think my expectations are very high. I think once you get your bar up, you don't ever expect to let your personal bar drop. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think Mike helped me get my bar up.
You then became the general manager of North American operations. Can you tell us about the Windows 95 launch?
Yeah, we formed operations by taking functions out of the company and adding in the manufacturer. So we took the outsourced piece that I was eventually had run as part of the sales operations and the financial piece of transactions and put them together with manufacturing, and they decided I should do that. I knew nothing about manufacturing, but I had had experience in the other two areas. And that happened just before the launch of Windows 95, which was, at the time, certainly the biggest retail launch we'd ever done. It really changed the paradigm on how we did products. This is, people are waiting at midnight to buy this thing. It was an amazing phenomenon for our industry. And at the time, we didn't really have any kind of forecasting module or channel inventory, and so we decided how many products we needed to build. And it wasn't just Windows 95. It was a version of Office. There was mice. We turned this whole, we really turned on this huge marketing machine of product. And we had to, we saw the original forecast numbers and realized we couldn't possibly build that all. So we went across the country. We set up about 8 different manufacturing sites, and we started pumping this product out. And we anticipated the volume to be about 40% CD-ROM, which was fairly new media at the time, and 60% 3.5-inch media. And so we started to pump this out. And we had this big forecast number, and we started going through, and we actually weren't going to meet the forecast. So we actually had a weekend where we brought people in from throughout the company. Didn't have any experience in manufacturing. Just come in. We put you next to a person on the line who knew what they were doing, and we got people to come in for 2 weekends and just pop this product out. A lot of blood, a lot of tears. We got it all out and found out we'd missed the mix completely. Instead of being 40-60, it was 70-30 CD. And the licensing business kicked in at a much greater expectation than we had. So we found ourselves with a lot of inventory versus what our normal business model was. And we prided ourselves in high inventory turns. So we found ourselves with a lot of inventory, and I realized that for the first time in running a business, truly feeling part of running the business, had to explain to management that what I had done, which was build way more inventory than we were comfortable having. The story ends up well. The product was a great success. It all sold through the channel, but certainly a very tense time having to go to the executive group and explain to Bill how we could do this, and in fact how we hadn't communicated, how I hadn't communicated nearly well enough with the sales and customer. It was a great learning experience for me. It was to go back to your point, it was personally a very big failure, and one I reacted to pretty strongly in terms of investments we made on supply chain and communication and partnering with the sales team. In hindsight, it was a great experience of recovery. It was also experience. Probably a good experience for my ego in that you can fail and still live. But I wouldn't want to do that again. In fact, I plan on never doing that again.
I'll bet. Yeah. You then became the VP of Worldwide Operations. Was it different handling North America and then handling worldwide?
Yeah, the job is the same, but the business is hugely different. Great opportunity to understand culture. Europe, you go over there, you think, I'm pretty sophisticated. We'll turn it into the United States of Europe. We'll use the same processes we use here. And you just have to go over there and make all those U.S.-centric American mistakes, right? We're the center of the universe. We know it, and you get over there and you just make all those mistakes. They can almost see you coming, particularly at that time. It wasn't the United States. The VAT taxes were different, and we had decided we wanted to ship from Ireland throughout the continent, and I brought some of my vendors with me, and they turned out not to be very good on that continent. So we made all those mistakes. I'm much more understanding of cultures now. I'm much more understanding of why it's difficult to run a worldwide operation, and how much you need to understand the difference when you're on their territory than here. And I tell this story a lot. When I travel, and I go to Europe at least once a quarter, when I'm over there trying to understand the issues, and it's always obvious. When you're there, Redmond's stupid. When you're in Redmond, those people just don't play well. They don't cooperate. They want to do their own thing. Both are true, right? It's that divide between people. You're in France and you weren't invited to the conference call. Well, the conference call was 4 o'clock Redmond time. Nobody bothered to call you because you were home. Right. But what you think is they're not including me. You plan the 4 o'clock call and nobody from France calls in, and they're not cooperating. Right? So you need to have some of that growth if you're going to be a worldwide company, and I certainly learned that quickly.
I think it was sort of around this point that you also started really focusing on your management skills. What were some of the things that you did to become a stronger manager?
Well, I think your job changes and your need as a manager changes when the number of people in your org grow. Right? There's a certain management style you need with 3 people. It's different with 12. It's very different with 100, 300. I think I went from 1,200 to 3,000 people. You can't know them all. You can't see them regularly. Your need to delegate, even the difference between delegating to 1,200 versus delegating to 3,000 is a massive amount of trust and communication. And so I did realize that as I went through that, I think my management style, and maybe more importantly at that level, your leadership style, had been based primarily on competency. I was pretty competent in what I did. I had a view of what we were trying to accomplish as an organization. I think people will tend to follow competency up to some level.
Right.
And I decided that level was 1,200 people. And so when we moved into a new space, I realized I needed to change my communication style. I needed to change more my leadership style maybe than my management style. Because I was still only managing 10 people, right? Directly managing 12 people, but I was having the impact, and my behavior was having impact on a lot larger.
What are some of the things you did to work on your management style?
I actually got a coach. I brought in a woman to do a very extensive series of 360 interviews. Amazing. Connie has an amazing ability to listen and type at the same time.
Can you explain what a 360 interview is?
To interview people you work for, peers that you work with, and people who work for you. So, in not surprisingly, the view people have of you is different based on where they are in relationship to you. How do you work as a peer where your power is equal? How do you work as an employee for someone who has authoritative power over you? And how do you work as the authority figure? And so I got a lot of very personal feedback about strengths and weaknesses, and a lot of personal feedback about behavior characteristics, about the impact of putting my head on the table when I was frustrated. Things I hadn't realized, that the reaction that followed my putting the head on the table in a meeting was almost always going to be loud. And people don't like to tell you your breath is bad. Right? It's difficult for somebody to say, I really like working with you, but boy, when you do that. And so you need to either fix it or ignore it. Right? And you got to do something in between. I realized that the impact I was having and the organization I was running, I needed to think more about leadership than management. It wasn't so much about execution and lack of failure. It was about leadership, vision, and the ability to get people to do the right thing even when it wasn't defined.
Do you feel that the changes that you made based on the coaching have made you a better leader?
I think it's helped evolve my leadership style from one of competency and power to one of vision and communication. Yeah, I think it's helped. You know, there's no panacea. You are who you are. It's hard to leave things that are successful, but I think one of the things that happens in an environment such as ours, particularly when things are going well, the conversation to start training is realize I wanted to spend more money and more cycles on training my people. And I realized I personally hadn't been to training in 7 years. Right? So I'd gone from managing 30 people to 3,000 people. It's not just managing. I didn't have any training.
Right.
I was busy trying to be successful. And so I think I look at that as just a different type of training, different part of education, which was to get good feedback and learn some skills.
When you were invited to take on the CIO role, you weren't exactly excited about it. Why weren't you excited, and why did you decide to take it?
I'd never thought of that as a career path or something I wanted. I was very excited about where we were in the operations space. The business was changing. I had a great team, and I thought we really were going to do some exciting things. I ran an application as part of operations. I had about a 250-person application team that built apps for the business, but I'd been somewhat critical about IT at Microsoft and their ability to deliver some of my needs.
I'm sure very quiet about it.
Very quiet about it. Fortunately, John and I have a good and deep relationship, so I could be very candid with my view. But it just wasn't something that was of great interest to me, and mostly because I was very focused on completion of vision that I'd put in place in ops. I'd been there 2.5 years. We were going to get to where we wanted to get to, and I wanted to complete that.
For a person with a self-admitted fear of failure, how do you handle being responsible for an environment where something fails every day?
That was a shock to me early. I didn't realize things failed every day, but
What they do.
when you think about our environment, it's 450 sites, it's 6,000 servers, the number of devices in front of those servers, the routers, the switches, the network, the partners you need. It's a very complex environment, and things break. Hardware breaks, technology, software breaks, people break processes. So the first thing I did was fix the reporting, so I knew what was breaking. Right? My first month, I kept getting surprised by phone calls. So part of learning to live with things not working was to make sure I had an information system to let me know what wasn't working before the client base knows what's working. So that's one thing. The second was to get a better understanding of the role that technology, people, and process play in those failures, and really try to eliminate process and people failures, and focus all the failures to be technology. That's not true. And the reality is it's a combination of people, process, and technology failures. And the way I control it is to make sure the information flow is great, and to really focus much more deeply on the people and process failures as opposed to the technology failures. If we fix that, we'll worry about the technology when we get there.
Yeah. The other thing that we'd heard about you a lot when you were in operations is that you always knew the details. I remember one of my closest friends who had worked with you said that she was amazed the first time she met with you that you just knew every little bit about the process, which was surprising for somebody at your level, so far away from the person who actually touches stuff. You now move into a role in IT where it's impossible to understand that level of detail. How do you find a comfort zone in that?
Well, I think it's one of the characteristics of people who are successful at Microsoft, which is to know the details. And again, from the early days, I realized that Bill knew details. John Shirley was an amazing person in terms of his ability to know all the details about our business. And so
And John was the president.
John was president at the time. And so you try to emulate people you see being successful. So John, very successful. I knew Bill was very smart, but also had a great view of details. Mike Appy, great detail person. So I tailored myself or built myself after that, if you will. So in the IT space, I've tried to do the same thing. Learn as much as I can. I grabbed one of our architects for the first 6 months, and Dave went with me a lot of places, and I'd write my notes down and said, Dave, what does this mean? How does this work? Spend time in the data center sitting with guys to understand what is monitoring, and what is an NT event, and why are they important to know about. I can't write code. That's not what I do, but I do have a more than glancing knowledge of the infrastructure today. Am I comfortable with my knowledge? No. Am I getting more comfortable? Yes. You got to remember, we re-rev our data center 3 or 4 times a year, so I've got a lot of opportunity. What's the difference between Windows 2000 and Win 95? I get to be part of that growth period. So you keep trying to ramp the stage. I think it's probably helped my management style a ton. Going back to that management question, I need to rely on people to a much greater extent. I am much less intuitive in this job than I was in the operations job, because without that time in the role, without that details, my intuition is not as good. It's something that was a shock to me. I didn't realize how intuitive I was. I thought I was always very fact-based. But I'm not as intuitive in this role, and so I need to rely on my team, my direct team, to make sure they have those things. And I think it's not different than really any other role. If you want to be a leader, you should surround yourself by people that are not only better than you in some areas, but complement your skills in other areas. Right? And I think that's what I've tried to do with this team, is make sure that they complement my weaknesses or complement my strengths, fill in for my weaknesses, and I think we're having success at that.
Yeah. Another challenge that I think is probably going on at Microsoft right now, at least I know I was sort of feeling this when I was working my 13th hour for the 6th day in a row. I kept thinking, a couple of years of this and I'll be able to make a lot of choices after that, because the stock options did so well. You still have the same level of urgency to get things done. How do you manage that when the financial rewards are not what they had been, or not likely to be what they had been for a while?
Well, it's certainly a concern. The compensation model at Microsoft has always been based on a combination of salary, benefits, and stock. And when you take one of those components out, it certainly impacts people. I believe the most important attribute a person has at Microsoft is passion. And you can buy passion for some period of time, but you can't buy it for long. So it's an issue, right? People need to make sure that the equation is fair. How much am I putting in? What am I getting out? But I think we need to focus more on job quality, job content, and the excitement of the environment. Right? I know when I came to Microsoft, one of the great fears I had coming out of accountant was as I mentioned, these people were very similar to me. I was with these public accountants. They all had about the same education, all had been to good schools, were all very aggressively pursuing a career. And I didn't ever want to get into a position where I didn't think I was the dumbest person at the table.
Or you didn't think you were the dumbest?
Didn't think. No, that's one of the things that has kept me excited about Microsoft. I'm still the dumbest person at the table every time we sit down.
Do any of you believe that? I don't know. I don't believe that.
And so that need to compete with that group or stay on par, that's kept me excited. I think we need to do that with all people. We've got to find what is it that keeps them excited about the environment. If our compensation program isn't fair, we will lose people. There's no question about it. But I think people at Microsoft that are there for the long run understand that having profits is good, being a large company is good, that the dot-com scenario is a lot less attractive today than it was before April.
Right.
And I think people understand that the basis of what we do and the future of the company is still very strong. And we have something that probably no one else in our industry can offer, which is really the opportunity to change the world. You can change some things with a 50-person company or a 300-person company or a 600-person company. And I think a lot of that draw to be at this .x company was very appealing to some people. But our ability to take 50,000 people and focus them on something is something that not everybody has. We really have the resources, the people, and the leadership to do amazing things. And that will take care of a portion of that void that the options might take away, because I don't think you can do that just anywhere. Right. And that's what we need to focus on.
Given that you change jobs every 1.5 to 2.5 years, what do you think you'll do next?
I never thought about the last job, so it's a little after this number of years, I'm probably not going to think about the next job. My career path has always been the same. Do the very best job I can do tomorrow, and something good will happen. And if it stops happening, then I'll do something else. But I never thought I'd end up in sales. I never planned to run a manufacturing and distribution organization. I never planned on being a CIO. You wouldn't chart my career path and say, wow, these steps all made sense. So how do you become a CIO? We'll start in finance and then go to sales. So being as I've been pretty lucky at this pace, I'm probably not going to change that philosophy for the next one. They'll either tell me it's time to do something else. I think Peter never knows when the Peter principle hits, right. But they'll find something for me.
What are some of the attributes that you think are particularly important for success at Microsoft?
I think there's three, and when I do the new employee orientations, I always give this list. There's three, and I've never found anything to change it. First is intellect. We're a company that hires and looks for smart people. I think we need to use the word intellect instead of intelligence, because there's raw intellect, and then there's knowledge, right? Deep technical knowledge is one thing, deep operational knowledge, subject matter expert, but you have to be smart about what you do, and whether it's just general smarts or specific smarts on your skill set, you have to have that. That's entry. You have to be results driven. I found really smart people get boring over time if they never do anything. Right? We're a culture that needs to get stuff done. And most important is passion. We change direction, we never have enough resources, the time constraints are always too tight. My pet project isn't anybody else's pet project. The thing that gets people through is passion, and if we ever lose that, we have no history as a company, because I think it's what drives it. If I can only pick one, I'll take passion over intellect every time.
What if you could be far away and still be close to everyone and everything that's important to you? If you could talk to anyone in your family the instant you thought about them, or have a meeting with foreign business associates like you were in the same room, what if you could have the information you need come to you when you wanted it? And you had the power to make all the pieces of your life come together more than you ever imagined. Welcome to the future of wireless from AT&T. Your universe is getting smaller, and staying at the center of it just keeps getting easier. Wireless from AT&T. Your world close at hand.
Working towards being a manager of people rather than projects, and having low tolerance for people who don't do their homework, and not wanting to fail. How do you deal with people who do fail you? How do you deal with that kind of situation?
Did that all come up in this session? Sometimes when I say this, people don't understand it. Managing people, to me, is a lot like raising children. And my management style certainly has increased as my children have gotten older. What you really want people to do is share your values, know right from wrong, and meet their commitments they set. That's what you really want people to do, and that's ideally, I think, what you want your kids to do, because when they leave, that's all they have, is what you've taught them is right and wrong, and what your values are, and whether they'll meet the commitments they make. So when people fail, the question I ask, and where the difficulty comes in working with me, is what they know. Right? Sometimes things happen. Things happen that are out of your control. But why was there failure? Was there failure because your ego didn't allow you to partner with somebody? Was there failure because you didn't see it coming, and so by the time you knew the business, it was too late to recover? Was there failure because you weren't watching? Was there failure because you didn't lead? There's not much tolerance for those things. I used the Windows 95 example that Laura used. I failed, but it wasn't for any of those reasons. We overbuilt to what we thought was a good forecast. We didn't see the market shift in media. Could I have done better? Yes. should I have been fired for that result? And that's the extreme, right? We don't fire a lot of people, but at the extreme, the very personal thing, could you lose your job for doing something that bad? Yeah, you could. But I think the view was, why did it happen? Do you know? What are you doing about it? And was it something that could have been avoided? Not every failure can be avoided, but I would look at those things and say, what was the cause? Did you have the right values? Did you meet the commitments you said you were going to meet individually as you're trying to go there? And I think most failure that I've seen, the really big ones, have to do with something about ego or not watching it. Right? Everything gets shaky as you go through, right? The question is, if you notice it, once inertia turns, it's very hard to recover from. If you see it as it starts to turn and you get the right help, failure is an option.
What if you could be far away and still be close to everyone and everything that's important to you? If you could talk to anyone in your family the instant you thought about them? Or have a meeting with foreign business associates like you were in the same room? What if you could have the information you need come to you when you wanted it? And you had the power to make all the pieces of your life come together more than you ever imagined. Welcome to the future of wireless from AT&T. Your universe is getting smaller, and staying at the center of it just keeps getting easier. Wireless from AT&T. Your world close at hand.
The University of Washington Business School, located in Seattle, Washington, ranks among the top business schools in the United States. Information Technology Leaders is one of the many ways the UW Business School forges partnerships and reaches out beyond the university. For more information about the University of Washington Business School or Information Technology Leaders, visit informationtechnologyleaders.com.
I'd like to close with a quote that's actually a composite of two people that have worked with Rick. Rick embodies the successful Microsoft executive with his intelligence, love for technology, and drive to succeed. He works very hard to become an expert regarding whatever he's responsible for. He's internally motivated by a challenge and has little time for people who don't do their homework. He's extremely rewarding to those who get results and don't whine. He pushed me to be my best. He can look at a 100-row, 50-column spreadsheet and spot the problem. I used to have to prepare for hours with my team for just a 30-minute meeting with him. Rick has an uncanny 3D thing that allows him to see problems from every angle, focus in on core issues, and explode it. If you're prepared for that, you can become a career-long ally. If you weren't prepared, then the meeting is over. I respect his sharpness, pride, fairness, and his professionalism. I'd work for him again in a heartbeat. I think we understand why.
That's really nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.